Imagine that you get your hands on the latest computer of 1981, the IBM Model 5051, also called the IBM PC. It was a state-of-the-art machine with 16 kilobytes of RAM, a single color display that could show 80 columns by 25 lines of high-resolution green colored text, 160 kilobytes of storage, and a 4.77 MHz processor, all at a lucrative price of just $1,500. You might be thinking that the numbers that I just mentioned must be incorrect, right? Well, they are absolutely correct. While you are watching this video on a device that is likely 1,000 times more powerful than this revolutionary IBM PC, things used to be quite different not very long ago in the 1980s. Up until the 1980s, computers were only used in offices for business users. And IBM was the absolute market leader in this segment for several decades, with no other company coming even close to them. And as I said, in 1981, IBM decided to launch the IBM PC, the first machine that targeted individual users with personal computers. Before this time, personal computers were absolutely unheard of. You only saw these machines in offices and corporate buildings. But the IBM PC was an instant hit in the market. It sold 65,000 PCs in just 4 months, as individuals like doctors, lawyers, and tech enthusiasts started taking more interest in the machine. And on 12 August 1981, one of those sales was to a 16-year-old teenager named Michael Dell. Michael was not an ordinary child, and as soon as he received the computer, he ripped it apart and he started looking inside it. As his parents watched their son in horror while he tore open a machine for which they had just paid over $1,500, Michael noticed something else. Absolutely nothing inside the machine was actually made by IBM. All the parts were from other companies. The CPU was from Intel, and every other chip used was marked with the name of its manufacturer, which was not IBM. Not even the operating system, MS-DOS, was developed by IBM. It was made by a tiny little company named Microsoft. Michael realized that he could just walk into his nearby electronics store, buy the chips he needed, and upgrade his PC in whichever way he liked. So he increased the storage of his computer to 10 MB at a very cheap price. A cool feat for a 16-year-old teenager and something that he was quite proud of. But then one day, a lawyer happened to see his modified PC and wanted the same for himself. And he was ready to pay for it as well. So Michael agreed and upgraded his PC, and suddenly Dell was in business. One client led to another, and soon Michael was doing this for hundreds of people. In 1994, he established a small company called PCs Ltd. And over the years, it absolutely exploded. He moved on from storing the computers in his college dorm room to a condo to a full-fledged office and warehouse. He was still customizing IBM and compact PCs, making small changes like increasing the RAM or the memory, and selling them to doctors, lawyers, and architects all across the United States, with most of his sales being driven by ads that he used to put in computer magazines. And finally, in 1985, Dell moved on from selling just IBM PCs and also introduced their first brand name computer, the Turbo PC. It had the exact same configuration as the IBM PC that was a hot seller back then, but while the IBM PC was sold for up to $2,500, you could get the Turbo PC by Dell for just $795. Same configuration, same machine, but at 1/3 the price. And additionally, Michael still allowed the customers to customize their computer as they wished, something which no other company was doing back then. Michael had figured out that large companies like IBM were selling one-size-fits-all machines, which customers could not customize even if they wanted to. They were stuck with the standard options that were available in the market. So this model of selling customized computers directly to customers with no middleman involved was an excellent business proposition back then. And in 1986, he formally incorporated as Dell Computers. And in that year, the company made $33 million in revenue. But what really gave Dell another boost was when in 1987, it started providing free same-day or next-day on-site service to all its customers. You have to understand that getting support this quick, and that too at your site, in your home or your office, was unheard of back then. And Dell became the first company with this offering. This boosted the review and public perception of Dell, and soon enough, Dell was selling to large corporations as well as the US government itself. From $69 million in 1987, Dell went on to do $257 million in 1989, growing by 370% in just 2 years, and by 1993, Dell was doing over $2 billion in sales annually. It had grown from 650 employees to more than 5,000 employees in just 5 years. But as the company grew and expanded, Dell was caught by surprise with a revolution that almost killed the company. In the early 90s, another leap in personal computing was unfolding: the advent of portable computers, which we now know as notebooks or laptops. Early laptops used to be quite unlike what we have today. They had tiny screens, they looked very ugly, and they weighed over 3 kilograms. Dell's first laptop itself, the 212N notebook, weighed 2.8 kg and was 2 inches thick, with a poor battery life. And Michael was finding it hard to replicate the success with desktop PCs. To make things worse, the PowerBook laptop was launched by a partnership of Apple and Sony in 1991, and it quickly captured 40% of all laptop sales with a billion-dollar business. And as a result, in 1994, Dell saw a loss in earnings for the first time ever since they had gone public back in 1988, as their shares in laptop sales continued to plummet. While other major PC manufacturers were getting 20% of their revenue from laptop sales, Compaq, Dell's major competitor, was getting 30% of their revenue from laptop sales. For Dell, it was just 6%. So Michael tried to learn from the success of Apple, and he managed to succeed in replicating them, quite literally. He started poaching people from Apple, beginning with John Medica in 1993, the head of the engineering team that created the PowerBook, and Eric Haslam, the VP of Apple's Macintosh division. And it worked. In 1994, Dell launched a new series of laptops, the Latitude. It was a well-designed, solid machine with more than 8 hours of battery life, selling at almost half the price of compact laptops. And Dell was back in business. Since the launch of Latitude in 1994, Dell has sold over 400 million notebook computers. That is more than 70 laptops every single minute. But this close call with the laptop fiasco made Michael introspect on a much deeper level. He recognized that, contrary to his belief, the computer industry was evolving much faster than anyone else realized. And to stay relevant, he had to stay up to date and diversify. And one of the markets that immediately caught his eye was servers. Servers were gigantic online storage solutions that companies needed to store and access their data. Unlike PCs, servers were a complex offering and were used exclusively by corporate organizations, but the margins on them were really high. Dell entered the server market in 1994, and by the end of the 1990s, it became one of the leaders in the industry. So although Dell was doing really well, and its revenue had already crossed $2 billion in 1993, the slowing growth of personal computers, the rapid boom in the laptop segment, and the success with the server industry reinforced Michael's belief that in order to survive and grow beyond that $1 or $2 billion mark, he needed to diversify. So he continued to act on this strategy as the years progressed, launching Workstations in 1997 and networking equipment in the early 2000s. But one of the most significant steps in this direction actually came in 1994. At this time, there were just over 2,700 websites in the entire world, up from just 130 websites in 1993. And while there was no Google, Amazon, or Wikipedia at this time, there was a Dell.com. Michael also thought that Dell's exclusive direct-to-customer model would fit in seamlessly with the e-commerce model that was yet to evolve back then. So in 1996, Dell introduced the option of online purchases on their website. And by the end of that same year, Dell was doing $1 million in online sales alone. And in 1998, Dell finally surpassed IBM and Apple to become the second largest PC company in the world, with over $12 billion in sales. By the time 2000 was here, Dell had become so successful in such a short period of time that it had generated serious wealth through stock options for thousands of its employees in Texas, who used to roam around in expensive cars and were called Dellionaires. But even when doing $12 billion in revenue, Michael was still fixated on what would drive the next phase of their growth. PCs accounted for about 45% of Dell's revenue, but only 15 to 20% of their profit. And Michael was one of the visionaries who realized that while PCs and servers would continue to be necessary, it was the soul of the machine the software that was going to dominate the coming age of technology. Unlike PC, selling pure software could mean that your margin was as high as 98% because there is no cost of materials. Software is basically just a piece of code on the computer. For example, developing a game like GTA 5 that delivers a lot of value may cost you $250 million, but you could sell it to one customer or a billion customers. That cost of creation does not change. So software becomes exponentially profitable as it gains more users. GTA 5 has generated $7.7 billion in revenue ever since it was released after an initial investment of just $250 million. So in the late 2000s, Dell started looking at PCs as potential loss leaders. They were a way to get in the door even at a very low profit margin, but then used to upsell software and service for pure profits. It was much easier to sell Dell software to people who were already using Dell hardware, since they already had access to that customer base. And perhaps the most significant step in this direction was the advent of Dell into virtualization. Virtualization allows a single computer to run multiple operating systems at the same time on a single physical machine. So you can run Linux, Windows, as well as Mac OS on the same computer at the same time. And at this time, VMware was a startup in Silicon Valley that pioneered virtualization software. Another upcoming promising sector at this time was also data storage solutions and cloud-related offerings. And another company called EMC had become the world leader in this segment. Michael saw the potential of these two companies, EMC and VMware, and how they seamlessly fit into his strategy of selling software. And beginning in 2002, he started making strategic investments into these and pairing them with Dell products. Michael was right. And by 2004, VMware had become a monopoly that was the industry standard, and its use was spreading like wildfire. 2004 was also when EMC acquired VMware. Dell continued to be the primary hardware vendor selling servers, which were optimized for VMware's virtualization software, and Dell's server solutions complemented EMC's storage solutions. So in the end, the final customer got an integrated hardware software platform for all their needs. It was a win-win-win situation for all. However, since Dell was still dependent on hardware for their revenue, most of the profits actually went to EMC. So in 2016, Michael Dell made the boldest move in the history of the tech industry. He acquired EMC, a public company, for $67 billion in the most expensive tech acquisitions of all time. It was not easy. He had to finance it through a debt of about $50 billion. And there was obviously a lot of speculation that the debt might sink the company altogether, with people saying that they would have to pay almost $2.5 billion a year in the interest payments alone. But fortunately, most of these speculators have been proven wrong so far, as Dell continues to thrive, already having paid off a significant portion of this debt. And as for the last financial statement of Dell, ending in the financial year 2023, the ISG segment of Dell's business, which includes the storage and virtualization solutions originally offered by EMC, accounts for 40% of the overall revenue, but almost 57% of Dell's overall profit as a company. So how did Michael Dell manage to start a small company from his dorm room with just $1,000 and manage to make it one of the biggest tech companies in the world, beating out giants like IBM and Compaq, which had millions of dollars to their aid? What did PCs Ltd do differently that IBM or Compaq could not do? Well, firstly, it was Michael's innovation with the direct-to-customer or D2C model. This model, which by the way was completely unheard of back then, removed the middleman and their commission and sold directly to customers. Initially, it was via mail order, and later on it was online through Dell.com. So Michael was able to sell his computers at a much cheaper price than his competitors and still make similar profits. This model also allowed them to customize their offering for each customer. For IBM, it was not possible to make as many variations as offered by Dell, because they shipped out ready-to-purchase, ready-made computers. If Dell had to offer 10 different RAM and memory variants of a computer, it just had to keep the extra RAMs and storage drives ready at its warehouse. But for IBM to do the same, it had to build 10 different variants and ship them out to hundreds of suppliers across the US. So if IBM's initial cost of inventory was $100 million, adding these variants would turn this cost into $1 billion. And this also turned into Dell's second advantage. their lean model of operation. While companies like IBM had to invest a lot in inventory, which in turn had to be stored in the retail outlets, Dell did not need any of that, since they assembled computers only once an order came in, which also meant that they always had fresh inventory. This was a time when the cost was always coming down and technology was improving very rapidly. So if IBM had a chip that was purchased 3 months ago, while Dell had a chip that was purchased today, Dell's chip would be cheaper and it would perform better as well. Due to this lean model, while Compaq had operating costs of 36% of revenue, Dell was at just 18%. So eventually, while IBM and Compaq were big competitors, no one was able to match Dell's offering. Dell was making lightning fast computers, tailoring it to the customer's needs, delivering them in a very short time, and still managing to have the most affordable product in the market. And finally, it was the man Michael Dell himself. Michael says that he worked 16 hours a day and he even used to sleep in his office in the initial days. Starting with just $1,000, Michael used to invest everything back in the company even when the company was doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. But what really set him apart was his ability to accept his shortcomings and allow other, more experienced people to step in. While he himself started as just a 20-year-old CEO with no formal business experience, he continued to hire industry experts over the years, who in many cases were decades older than him, and elevating them to positions of pseudo co-founders and VPs. A small example of this was how he hired John Medica and Eric Haslem from Apple to create the Latitude series of notebooks. And this was the story of how Michael Dell created one of the biggest tech companies in the world. I have added a link to his autobiography in the description below. It is an excellent read to know more about the journey of Dell. And while you're in the description, follow me on LinkedIn as well. If you found value in this video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below and share it with more people to motivate them. Let me know in the comments which story you want me to cover next. Until then, goodbye.